Okay, good morning and welcome to day 2 of the South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference from Florida State University and also working with Christ University in Bangalore. And we're beginning day 2. You can follow us on the YouTube link. If you can't find that, we've sent lots of emails, and there's also the link is on the conference website with the College of Communication Information. We're very happy to start today off with our guest speaker and our keynoter for this morning, His Excellency Ambassador Munir Akram. Ambassador Akram is the permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations, and he's also the president of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Ambassador Akram has been serving as the president of the Economic and Social Council in his current term since July of 2020, and he's the ambassador and permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations in New York, and has been doing that since November of 2019. Ambassador Akram has a long and distinguished career in the Foreign Service in Pakistan. He served at the United Nations before, and both in New York and Geneva. He's also served as Pakistan's ambassador to the European Council, both in Brussels and Luxembourg. And he's also been president of the Security Council during his time serving at the United Nations, and served on quite a wide variety of UN boards and review bodies and commissions. So we're very glad to have him here today. And the title of his talk fits well within our purposes of our conference is Pakistan's Priorities in South Asian Peace and Stability. And again, thank you, Ambassador Akram, for joining us, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
Professor, and I'm very happy to join the conference today in your second day of your conference. As you mentioned, my talk would be on Pakistan's priorities in South Asia. But to start with, Pakistan's primary national priority is economic and social development. We obviously, like other developing countries, but perhaps even more than some developing countries, we face huge challenges. We had a weak economy, which has been afflicted with huge deficits in the external account and deficits in the internal budget account. And the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan, which has been in office for 2 years, has been grappling with trying to bring both deficits into balance. So that's our primary objective as such. The Pakistan economy has been hit very hard by the COVID pandemic, and that has exacerbated both the economic vulnerabilities as well as exacerbated inequalities. The program of the government, which has injected about $8 billion into the economy to keep it afloat, to help the poor and the most vulnerable, and to control the pandemic. This program has been fairly successful. We have contained the pandemic, at least the first wave, we did very well. But we are now grappling with the second wave. We hope that we will have access to the vaccine to control the pandemic as such. But Pakistan, unfortunately, is also challenged on the external front. We have huge challenges both on the western borders as well as the eastern borders. The primary challenge we have had is the dispute with India over Kashmir, and the fraught relationship with India, which covers several disputes and differences that have prevailed and persisted for many years. On the Western side, we have had a 40-year war in Afghanistan, and we have always advocated a political solution to that conflict. Finally, the international community has agreed that the Afghanistan conflict can only be resolved through a political solution and not through military means. In Kashmir, our central concern is the denial of the right of self-determination to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, a right which was recognized by the Security Council in 1947, and the Security Council advocated is resolution of the dispute, a disposition of the territory of Jammu and Kashmir through a UN-supervised plebiscite, which would allow them to determine whether they wish to join India or Pakistan. That plebiscite has never happened. Several stages of Kashmiri resistance has taken place over the many years. Since 5 August 2019, the situation has been exacerbated because of the revocation unilaterally by the Indian government of the autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir, and a lockdown, the injection of a very large force to crush the Kashmiri resistance. There are reports of huge and massive violations of human rights in Kashmir. This has been validated by the United Nations Human Rights Community, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, several special rapporteurs as such. And now, in what the Indian government has called the final solution for Jammu and Kashmir, there is an effort to change the demography of Jammu and Kashmir, to change it from the present Muslim majority status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir into a minority, and by bringing in other people, outsiders from the West, from India, into Jammu and Kashmir. Last year, the Indian government has issued 1.5 million domicile certificates to outsiders to come and settle into Kashmir, and this is clearly a campaign to change the status. India also has adopted an aggressive posture towards Pakistan. There are violations of ceasefire along the line of control between India and Pakistan. We have evidence of Indian sponsorship of terrorist organizations from Afghanistan to destabilize Pakistan in order to silence our advocacy for Jammu and Kashmir. And therefore, cumulatively, there is a danger of, ever-present danger of a conflict between India and Pakistan. And this is a threat to international peace and security. In Afghanistan, Pakistan has played a very active role in trying to promote a political solution and to secure a peaceful settlement of the conflict that has raged there. There has been substantial progress. An agreement was reached in February last between the United States and the Taliban for the end of terrorism on the one hand and the withdrawal of foreign forces on the other. There has been an agreement to start the intra-Afghan talks, which are now taking place in Doha. And after quite difficult negotiations, the two sides have agreed on rules and procedures for the negotiations that are being conducted there. We hope that progress will continue to be made. We hope that the new US administration which has taken office, will continue to support the peace process, and that there will be no detraction from the agreements that have been reached so far. We think that any turning back from the peace process at the present time would be a great tragedy. Unfortunately, what makes the resolution of the problems that we face both in Kashmir and Afghanistan more difficult, particularly with regard to Kashmir, is the emergence of confrontation between the United States and China. And South Asia, unfortunately, is becoming closely involved with this great power rivalry and competition. The US has forged a strategic partnership with India. It has opened all the spigots of military weapons supplies and technologies to India. Several foundational defense agreements have been concluded, including the recent one, which is called BECA, which provides US access to US guidance systems for attacking its adversaries. While the US motivation for supplies to India, military supplies and support to India, may be directed against China, the fact is that 70% of India's forces, weapons, all land, air, sea, they are all deployed against Pakistan. And therefore, Pakistan has a legitimate right to be concerned about the erosion of the mutual deterrence which has been in place since both countries exploded nuclear weapons devices in 1998. And we, on the one hand, supplies to India, on the other hand, all weapon supplies, technology, etc., has been stopped to Pakistan from the US and from its Western allies. At the same time, Sino-Indian relations have deteriorated, especially after 5th of August, when India took the unilateral measures to change the status of Jammu and Kashmir. And there have been Indian claims to the territory of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which is administered by Pakistan. India has opposed the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, claiming that it ran through this Indian territory. And its Home Minister has openly laid claim to Aksai Chin, which is presently under Chinese administration and claimed as Chinese territory. This deterioration was visible in the Ladakh standoff in 2020 and is a complicating factor in the resolution of the Kashmir issue. Pakistan-US relations, on the other side, are also very fragile. Pakistan has held back from support to the Kashmiri freedom struggle, and we have maintained a measure of cooperation with the United States, especially on the Afghan political settlement, and we're looking forward to engaging with the Biden administration to see how to build other areas of cooperation. It is critical to the future of South Asia as to how US-China relations evolve and what its impact is on South Asia, on China-India relations, and on Pakistan-India relations. There are possible pathways to cooperation. There are also pathways to a less happy outcomes as we see it. We have to therefore see how the United States wants to balance its relationships in South Asia between India and Pakistan. Pakistan would want to have excellent relations with the United States, despite our close relationship with China. But these are issues which still hanging fire and need to be addressed in the forthcoming months. Peace in South Asia would be possible only if India and Pakistan can resolve the Kashmir dispute. This is the core dispute between them. It has been the cause of several wars between them. The alternative to peace and resolution of Kashmir is a disastrous outcome, or at best, a situation of no war, no peace, and no development as such. Uh, uh, I believe that the steps can be taken towards a solution of the Kashmir dispute. A first step has to be a halt in the human rights violations in Kashmir. Second step has to be a reversal of the unilateral measures that were taken by India and the restoration of Kashmir's autonomy, and then the opening of negotiations between Pakistan and India, with or without the intercession and intermediation of either the United Nations or some major powers like the United States, Russia, or China as such. We are not very hopeful, to be frank, about whether the Indian government would be ready to change its policies in this way and come towards the path of negotiations. They are particularly encouraged by the fact that they have a close relationship with the United States to adopt a very aggressive stance towards Pakistan. But the fact of the matter is that it is obvious that the Kashmiri people do not want Indian rule, and that India has been unable over 70 years to crush the Kashmiri resistance or to convince them to accept the Indian rule. That is visible even today after this heavy occupation. There is, secondly, always present and real danger of war between India and Pakistan, which would lead to catastrophe. As the Secretary General of the UN observed last week, it would be a catastrophe for the region, it would be a catastrophe for the whole world. When two nuclear armed states go into conflict, the consequences cannot be predicted. We came close to that in February 2019. Pakistan showed self-restraint, and the conflict, wider conflict, was avoided. But there's no promise that we will be so lucky the next time around. India has several reasons to move towards the path of peace with Pakistan. It would benefit from the cooperation that it would receive from Pakistan. It's India's ambitions to become a regional power and even a global power cannot proceed until it has the connectivity through Pakistan into Central Asia, until it has the peace and stability within South Asia to be able to exercise a larger role. I think that peace on the borders, regional economic integration would bring huge benefits for both India and for Pakistan and for the whole of South Asia. Therefore, given the present situation, given the dangers that are involved, given the massive violations of human rights that are taking place, given the stakes in Afghanistan, Central Asia, and the rest of Asia, it is time, we think, for a rethink of policies and this would be a good occasion. Today, in Pakistan, we are observing the Kashmir Solidarity Day. It's a day when the Kashmiris in 1933 rose up against the Maharaja. It epitomizes the Kashmiri resistance for over 75, 80 years. And this is, I believe, a good time for all of us to reflect and see how we should rethink the future and see if we cannot bring peace to South Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we're going to be asking for comments and questions from our audience members. And maybe I'll start off with just some general questions, because I think as you point out, is a long and many episodes in this conflict since the independence, in the conflict between India and Pakistan, and the Kashmir issues at the core of that. There have been periods where the leaders of India and Pakistan have seemed to move toward more communication, whether at the prime ministerial level, especially at the leadership level. And what do you think, what were the conditions when there seemed to be more openness toward negotiation and communication on some of these issues that led to those types of relationships? Again, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the conversations obviously between the leadership of the two countries, the content of the conversations related to the circumstances at each stage. I would say that between 1948 and 1955, the conversations related to how the two countries could agree to implement the Security Council resolutions calling for a UN plebiscite to enable the Kashmiri people to decide their own future. The Prime Minister of India, the first Prime Minister of India, Mr. Nehru, had on repeated occasions declared that India would live by whatever was decided by the Kashmiri people. And this was contained in the Security Council resolutions with the agreement of the Indian government and the Pakistani government and the United Nations Security Council. So the discussions during those years focused very specifically on how to implement those resolutions. And there were differing interpretations about how the forces were to be withdrawn, whose forces would go first, how many forces would be left to supervise the elections, and so on and so forth. That was the content of those discussions. We could not reach agreement because from our side, our assessment was that the Indian side procrastinated, obfuscated on those conditions, and the resolution could not be implemented until 1955, when or thereabouts, India then resigned from its agreement to implement the Security Council resolutions and declared that it was no longer ready to agree to the plebiscite in Kashmir. Later conversations became more difficult because it became about whether to go back to the Security Council resolutions and the call for plebiscite, whether to find a different kind of a solution for Jammu and Kashmir. And those negotiations have then focused sometimes on the territorial issue, sometimes on the issue of eliciting and how to elicit the wishes of the Kashmiris, if not through a UN plebiscite. It was different ways to elicit those agreements. And then, of course, came the 1971 war, the loss of East Pakistan to Pakistan and transformation into Bangladesh. The conversation, the ceasefire agreement along the line of control, the ceasefire was adjusted because forces had moved on both sides, back and forth, and a new ceasefire line was demarcated, which was then thereafter called the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir. And we concluded what is called the Simla Agreement. And in the Simla Agreement, both Pakistan and India said we will resolve this issue through bilateral negotiations. But it was very clear that the Simla Agreement started with saying that they adhered to the principles of the UN Charter and that the agreement was without prejudice to the position of either side. The efforts then turned in the subsequent years as to how to implement the agreement at the bilateral level. And several rounds of bilateral negotiations took place, which remained fruitless and infructuous because on the fundamental issue of the wishes of the Kashmiri people, there was no acceptance on the part of India to rely on the wishes of the Kashmiri people as the basis for a resolution of the conflict. We came into several confrontations. The biggest confrontation we had was in 2002, when forces from both sides were deployed against each other for almost a year. And thereafter, there was a rapprochement between President Musharraf and the government of Prime Minister Vajpayee at that time, later succeeded by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and some substantive discussions took place as to how to resolve the issue. There was a proposal on the table, which is called the 4-point proposal, which basically stated that we would have, that Kashmir would be considered an autonomous state. The control of the two sides would remain where it was. The internal line of control would be open and free. And there would be some form of a joint administration of various parts of Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan, for its part, seemed to be ready to accept that, accept the formulated draft agreement, although there were reservations on some parts. But from the Indian side, they stepped back from the agreement that was seemed to be within reach. They stepped back. Perhaps there was a consideration that President Musharraf would not be in power for too long. And then, of course, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh also lost the election. So once Prime Minister Modi's government came into power, the situation went into reverse. And the resistance started. A young Kashmiri militant leader, Mr. Burhan Wani, was killed. There was uprising. Pakistan supported it. India was vociferous in opposing it. There were allegations of terrorism against Pakistan. Mumbai happened, and everything went south after that. When Prime Minister Imran Khan came to power, one of his first statement, he held out a proposal for peace with India. He said, if you take one step, we will take two steps. But unfortunately, there was the conflict in February of 2019 when the attack took place in Pulwama against Indian forces. And Mr. Modi and his government used that as an excuse to attack Pakistan, and almost leading to a major war. And thereafter, in August of 2019, India revoked the Articles 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution, and set upon what they themselves ominously call the final solution for Jammu and Kashmir. And I think that the circumstances, the space for any negotiations, I think was obliterated as a result of those unilateral measures. And we are where we are at the present moment.
Thank you. We have a question from our audience, and I'll read this. India is pushing to be a permanent member at the United Nations. How do the weakening relations between China, the United States, and India affect this? What would be the impact on Pakistan if India were to secure a permanent seat in the Security Council at the United Nations?
Yes, obviously, India has been seeking this status for almost 30 years or so at the UN. Pakistan obviously is not happy that if India were to have permanent seat on the Security Council with veto powers, Security Council would no longer be able to deal with India-Pakistan issues as an objective body, and therefore Pakistan would not be happy. But there are larger questions. I think there are a whole set of questions about whether this is the equitable way to reform the Security Council by bringing in new permanent members. The permanent membership of certain of the five is considered to be the reason why the Security Council cannot function at the present time, because the different conflicting interests of veto-holding powers do not allow the Security Council to take expeditious decisions. And therefore, adding new permanent members would only further complicate the decision-making functions of the Security Council. But finally, the fact of the matter is that for India to become a permanent member of the Security Council, or for anybody else to become a permanent member, or even to add to the non-permanent member of the Security Council, would require the concurrence of the permanent five members, the five veto powers as such. And two of them have expressed their support for India's permanent membership. The other three have not, despite what we hear in the press from some leaders in the United States about supporting India's quest for a permanent membership. They are not in favor of new permanent members. That's the bottom line. And until the permanent five do not agree to accept new members or new permanent members, there will be no expansion of the Security Council. This is the bottom line that India has to reckon with.
Thank you. Turning to Afghanistan, what incentives or pressures can Pakistan bring to bear on the Afghanistan government and the Taliban to advance the peace process there?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't term it as pressure, because obviously we are not a superpower to be able to arrogate to ourselves the right to exert pressure on somebody else. What we can do is try to incentivize. And we have tried, and that is how we've got as far as we have been able to get in the Afghan peace process. We have been able to incentivize and convince the Taliban that there is no military solution, that they cannot win by military means, and neither can the foreign forces, neither can the United States impose a military solution on Afghanistan or on the Taliban as such. So they have to find a way, and we have exhibited to them that there is a way through to peace, and they have been able to move towards that. As I said, three important steps have been taken: the US-Taliban agreement, the intra-Afghan talks which started, and the agreement between the two sides on the rules and procedures. These are important steps. at certain stage, people would have said that these are impossible steps that they could not have taken, but they have taken those steps. And now it is critical that this process should not be reversed by additional conditionalities or a reversion to thinking that there is a military solution. I know that there are some people, there are some what we call spoilers, who do not want peace and therefore would be very happy to disrupt this peace process. But once this process is disrupted, it will be like Humpty Dumpty. It will be very difficult to put it back together again. And therefore, it's important to stick with the process, to try and see how to improve the process, how to ensure an orderly withdrawal, how to convince the parties to share power and what basis to share power, and to be very careful of knowing who doesn't want peace, because we need to identify who doesn't want peace, because we have to isolate them and we have to work with those who do want peace and to try and push for peace in Afghanistan. It's possible, it's difficult, but it's possible. But it is a very delicate stage, because I know that the Biden administration is under all kinds of conflicting pressures about how to reverse things, how to change things, how to improve things, what mistakes were made. But the fact of the matter is, going back from where we are will be dangerous. Going forward is probably easier than going back.
Thank you. A couple more questions from our audience members. How have the negotiations around Kashmir changed once India changed the status of Kashmir as a union territory?
Well, as I said, once India changed the status of Jammu and Kashmir, it basically eliminated the space for negotiations. Because the negotiations which had come closest to an agreement, those between President Musharraf and Mr. Vajpayee, Prime Minister Vajpayee, and then later Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, those negotiations were based fundamentally on the concept of Kashmir as an autonomous state, and autonomy recognized by both sides. And to work within that autonomy to see how the interests of India and Pakistan could be reconciled with respect to that territory, and to reconcile the desires and wishes of the people of Jammu and Kashmir within the concept of autonomy. That was the space for negotiations. And that space was taken away when India declared it divided the state into two so-called union territories, and declared its sovereignty over it, and its own direct rule from New Delhi. That left no space for negotiations, and therefore it's difficult to see how to go back to negotiations until those measures are rescinded.
Thank you. We have some questions about media and communications. What do you think are the media and communication challenges in maintaining peace and stability in the South Asian region?
Well, I think India, as well as Pakistan, but India in particular, has a very developed media and communications capabilities. And there is no shortage of connectivity as far as the people of India and Pakistan is concerned with the new technologies that we have, the internet, the iPhone, all the Facebook, Telegram, WhatsApp, etc., provide ample space for communication. So we have a pretty fair idea of what each other is thinking. And the unfortunate fact is that the thinking is hugely divided along national lines, and the national divisions are very visible in the media and the communications. The Indian media, we've spoken about that. We've spoken about the fact that media today is also highly susceptible to manipulation. And it is difficult to discern fake news from real news. And this is one of the major issues that the United Nations is dealing with, how to deal with fake news. We had a recent revelation from Brussels NGO, which revealed a 15-year-old program run by a company out of New Delhi, running fake news about Pakistan. 750 websites, media outlets, 10 fake non-governmental organizations, dead people revived to plead, to say things at various institutions. A fake organization in Brussels which organized the visit of European parliaments to the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir. So I think media and communications has the capability to bring people of South Asia together, to be in high communications, in close communications. But we need to change the narrative. We need to change the sense of alienation, almost hatred, which is so visible in the media space today. We need to bring the state media, private media under some form of control, because just for the sake of ratings, media channels spew hatred and vie with each other to show how nationalistic they are. And this is, I think, an unhealthy development, which does not bode well for the relationship between India and Pakistan, but in all of South Asia. I think there's so much fake news going around, people committing suicide because they've been victimized. You know the stories that come out. We need to do something to contain this trend, which is very harmful.
Thank you. Here's another question from our audience. Do you think in a world saturated by media, the concept of cricket diplomacy still has strength to bring the countries together?
Certainly. I think we need to find every possibility of finding common ground. I think cricket is one thing that that people in the whole subcontinent hold to passionately. But I think we should utilize cricket diplomacy as we have in the past. But cricket diplomacy can also become a vehicle of hate. And we've seen that when the Pakistani team is excluded from the Indian, or Pakistani players are excluded from the Indian Cricket League, and the Indian teams refuse to come to Pakistan and play in Pakistan. That's, I think, involving when you bring politics into sport, then the capacity of sport being the vehicle for peace and diplomacy diminishes and serves the opposite purpose. So we need to have ground rules. We need to have some understanding of how we will approach sports, especially cricket, in the subcontinent, to promote better relations rather than worsening our relationship.
Great. Thank you. Here's another audience question. the digital revolution has opened vast opportunities for developing countries, not so much to catch up with the advanced countries, but to leapfrog, is the term that's been used, to a new and modern development paradigm. What are your thoughts on this claim about digital opportunities and what we call leapfrogging development?
Thank you. Thank you. No, in fact, coincidentally, in my present capacity as the president of the Economic and Social Council, I've used the exact phrase, the digital opportunity for developing countries to leapfrog into the future. And certainly, I think that in South Asia in particular, we have this opportunity multiplied several times because we have basic skills. We have the English language, which is the foundational language of the internet at the present moment. We have the connectivity. We have the ability to create the software. We have the ability to create the hardware. So this is a tremendous opportunity. But there are obviously some impediments in the way. And the impediments are multifold. One of the impediments is that the digital space today is controlled by a handful of corporations. And those corporations exist in only 2 countries. So that is a monopoly. And we need to find ways of creating different spaces in the digital arena where developing countries can have the ability to acquire the dominance over the space. It is a huge question that governments, even in the United States, have not been able to solve. You must have listened to the recent developments in the US Congress, hearings that have happened with the major technology giants. Similarly, in China, there is a tension between giants like Alibaba and the authorities. So we are at an inflection point where developing countries need to step into this space and to take as much control as possible. It's a huge debate. It's taking place at the United Nations, taking place elsewhere, but it's a huge debate. And then, of course, we come into cyberspace, cybersecurity, cyber information, fake news, all of those issues come up. But the basic point is how to get control of this technology and turn it towards developmental goals.
Thank you. On the economic front, I wanted just to ask you to talk about the benefits of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. I'm not sure that people will be aware of the kind of the scale and of that project and how significant it is, and wanted to get your perspective on that.
Thank you. Well, you know, the basic rationale for the China-Pakistan economic corridor, one was, of course, the communication link. You know, China's two-way trade is something like $400 billion per year. Most of it, that trade at the present moment, takes place along the eastern coastline of China. But China is building its relationships with the European landmass, and it is also building its relationships, economic relationships in the Middle East and in Africa. And the China-Pakistan economic corridor is not the only corridor that China will use. There are several others that they are creating in the Bay of Bengal and so forth. But to the Arabian Sea, this will be the major corridor for them. It will serve to enhance trade between Pakistan and the western parts of China, which are developing at the moment, like we are, and could build synergies between the two areas. It would be able to connect the Chinese economy with the Middle East and Africa, as I said. It could transform Gwadar into a transshipment point, not only for goods, but also for oil products, because if we can locate the refining capacity in Gwadar, crude supplied from the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Iran, could be refined there and then piped from Gwadar into China. And that has multiple savings in terms of the price per unit. Shipping refined products is much cheaper than shipping crude products as such. So huge complementarities there. But China-Pakistan Economic Corridor also has a component which seeks to industrialize Pakistan, because it cannot be a one-way street. The Chinese have committed about over $65 billion. About half of that is committed to energy development in Pakistan. So they've set up about 10 power plants over the last 4 years. There are several hydropower plants which are now under construction. And similarly, the communication road network, the rail network is being developed. And eventually, the objective is to connect it to both to Afghanistan and to Iran. We had on offer to connect the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the transport corridor, to India as well. But India has not accepted it. India has opposed the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor for various reasons, and has not joined what the Chinese call the Belt and Road Initiative as such. So that's a sad fact, because if India were to accept the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, you would have a connectivity that could go across continents, from Europe to Central Asia to South Asia and beyond, and to the Middle East, Western Asia. It would be a huge win-win situation for all the countries of the region, but we still are hoping that India will come around and that it will not isolate itself from this connectivity project.
Great. Well, thank you, Ambassador Akram. We very much appreciate your time in both in your providing the keynote address, as well as in answering a wide range of questions about Pakistan and South Asia. We have been privileged at Florida State University to have a number of doctoral students, Fulbrighters in our School of Communication over the past years from Pakistan, and as well as students in other units across campus. And so for my own personal experience of visiting Pakistan and being hosted, I've enjoyed the hospitality, and also though have learned more about the complexity and the difficulty of some of the challenges that you've described today. And so I very much appreciate your efforts to advance the issues in South Asia and the challenges in South Asia on many fronts. And so we thank you again for your time, and if you have any closing comments, but we're very much appreciate you taking the time during your busy schedule here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Thank your university for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I wish you all the best and great success in your country.